ago, from the moment Tom and Geneva Miracle moved into their house in Irvington, Kentucky, they claim they've been plagued by strange sounds and sightings, mostly in their daughter's upstairs bedroom.
My daughter has said before many times that she felt like there was something here. She was telling about a time that she was in bed and she had just woke up just a little bit and the door opened and then it closed again like somebody was checking on her.
Two neighbors claim they've also seen something, or someone.
I have seen this apparition face to face at a distance of about 7 or 8 feet.
She appeared to me as a flesh and blood person.
These two eyewitness encounters were remarkably similar in their description.
I would say she was about 70 years old.
Aged, I'd say, in her 70s.
Her hair was dark gray. It was pulled to the back in a bun.
Gray hair drawn back from her face.
I don't believe in ghosts, nor do I believe in poltergeist or some of the things you hear about. But neither can I explain what I saw.
A man who knew the woman who occupied this house told us about her.
Our neighbor was Eva Kerrigan. You could distinguish who she was from her walk. She had it, I call it a shuffle. It seemed like on one leg to the other. Yeah.
In order to find out what, if anything, was in their home, Tom and Geneva called in two renowned psychics, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who had been told nothing about the previous occupant. Lorraine Warren claimed she made contact with the spirit of the old lady, but she warned Tom and Geneva not to try the same.
Okay. I see the woman.
All right.
It's as if she is dragging some part of her body, the lower part of the body.
Mm-hmm.
She is going to stand her ground in this home. It's going to take a lot to get that lady to leave this house. She has found home again. Don't try to communicate with what is there. All you can possibly do is to invite something in. But what are you inviting in?
However, some people who've had similar experiences and happenings in their homes want to make contact with and get rid of whatever it is. One such man is Dick Pointer, who lives in the 34-room Lemp mansion in St. Louis.
It's a matter of opinion as to who haunts the house. There's a possibility of 3 different people. William Sr. committed suicide in the house in 1902. His eldest son, William Jr., committed suicide in 1922. Both of them in this room. Charles Lemp, who was William Lemp Jr.'s brother, committed suicide in 1949 downstairs.
Dick Pointer is, or was, a non-believer until he says he began to hear and see things he couldn't explain.
I'm not one to be real willy-nilly or afraid, very likely, but I went up and locked myself in my room.
After a few similar experiences, Dick Pointer called on the services of 2 psychic detectives, Gordon Honer and his associate Phil Goodwilling.
The first thing we do before we go on an investigation is try to do as much preliminary screening. Since we're not trying to prove or disprove whether the phenomena involved is real, it really doesn't matter too much if we're aware of what the phenomena is in advance.
Phil and Gordon arrived at the Lemp house with 2 other people who were unfamiliar with the house or the happenings. The first thing Phil and Gordon do in such cases is to conduct a seance, and they bring 2 strangers because they say with 2 objective observers, it's easier to conduct their investigation. That night, they claim they contacted the spirit of the last Lemp to die, who evidently lost a lot of money during the Depression under Roosevelt's New Deal.
Well, apparently, Charles Lemp was a Republican. The things that he spelled out is obscenity, Roosevelt.
The answer, yes.
In their investigation, Gordon and Phil also used tape recorders and cameras. And on the last night of their investigation of the Lemp mansion, they took this inexplicable photograph of what looks like a man wearing glasses.
Science has not been able to define what a ghost really is, and after thousands of years, they still don't know what it is. They have not been yet able to either prove it or disprove it.
Not all spirits who are contacted through seances are there to frighten people. In Florida, we met a group that tried to contact a spirit who entertains people. Frequently, psychic Mickey Dane, along with 5 people who include Elvis Presley's cousin and his mother, gather to try to make contact with Elvis. Tonight, they didn't hear from Elvis, but one woman claims she heard from Elvis's mother, who said they'd hung up a "Do Not Disturb" sign.
And she wanted to say that, please stop, I want my son with me.
If Mrs. Presley didn't want to be bothered, who were we to intrude? So we left Mrs. Presley, Mickey Dane, and her friends alone to argue it out. In the meantime, John went to Oklahoma to cover a well-publicized story about a young boy whose family claimed he had not only heard from his dead uncle, but who is his dead uncle.
This is the intersection of 29th and Ferguson on the outskirts of Blackwell, Oklahoma. On August 12, 1967, a hay truck ran a stop sign here, and 14-year-old Jimmy Hauser, driving 80 miles an hour, rammed into the back of it. This grave in Tonkawa marks the spot where Jimmy Hauser was buried. But some people believe that Jimmy Hauser is not in this 13-year-old gravesite, but in the body of 5-year-old Jeremy Anderson. Jeremy's parents began to feel something unusual was possessing their son when he first began to talk.
He was 2 years old, and he would say, like we'd be sitting eating supper, and he'd say to Ronnie and I, before you and Daddy were born, I lived with Grammy in a little house. I wasn't sure if it was just his imagination or, if he was just telling a story or what.
His eyes would, when he would start talking those things, like he would have this spaciness in his eyes, which let me know that it was something out of the ordinary from him. It wasn't the Jeremy, it was something else trying to come through.
Someone else who felt someone else was trying to come through little Jeremy was Jeremy's grandmother and Jimmy Hauser's mother.
One day, my husband was in bed, and he'd hurt his back. And Jeremy said, what's the matter with you, Papa? And Jack says, well, I've hurt my back, Jeremy. And he says, is it going to kill you, Papa? And he says, well, I got my back hurt real bad one time, Papa, and it killed me. But he said, I didn't stay dead. He says, I just come back.
For 2 years, the family heard Jeremy saying these strange things about his past life and the accident, so finally they took him to Kingfisher, Oklahoma, to the Center for Reincarnation Studies to see Dr. R. Banerjee, a professor of philosophy who has researched reincarnation for over 24 years. The first thing Dr. Banerjee told me he did with Jeremy was to gather 5 pictures of friends of Jimmy Hauser and mix them in with those of strangers.
Out of the 5 and the 20, he selected, and he repeatedly said, they are my friends, they are my friends. And he will not select any other photograph, just all those 5 photographs only.
Dr. Banerjee then took Jeremy to the town of Tonkawa, a place that Jeremy had never been before, but a place Jimmy Hauser visited frequently. Dr. Banerjee claimed Jeremy began to recognize homes he could have never seen and was drawn to one store in particular.
We found that Jimmy Hauser, the late boy, used to come to that shop to meet his grandmother every day. Then he directed us to the end of the town.
And Jeremy said, stop the car right here. I stopped the car, and he said, now let me out. I want out. And he had run down a hill, and right there was the river where my brother had taken me for the first time when I went there 11 years ago, and I didn't even know we were anywhere near the river.
Following the visit to Tonkawa, Jeremy was then taken by Dr. Banerjee to the scene of the accident. They were led to the exact spot by a farmer, the only living eyewitness to the crash that killed Jimmy Hauser. The farmer told us about Jeremy's odd behavior when he first got to the scene.
And little Jeremy got out of the car, but he started to run through here, and he looked down the road, and he said, I thought he said, oh no. Then he ran behind my truck and began to cry. Put his head down on the bumper and began to cry. He said, I was hurting. My legs were broken and I was hurting, but I died on the way to the hospital and I didn't hurt anymore.
What did you think when you saw Jeremy doing that?
I wondered if he'd been hypnotized, but I don't believe so. I'd say definitely not, because he'd been playing with my little girl for probably 30 minutes out in the yard, and he was happy.
Everyone involved with this headline-making story agreed to take lie detector tests. However, we found no reporters who had talked to Jeremy, so we tried to talk to him and found out why no one else had talked to him.
Do you remember a couple of years ago telling your mommy and daddy that you had been here living with your grandmother before you were living with them?
No.
You don't remember ever saying that?
No.
What happened when you went down the highway to where the accident had happened?
I can't remember.
You don't remember. How do you account for the fact that when I talked to Jeremy, not only could he not remember anything from the past life, he could barely remember anything from this life?
Dr. Banerjee had told me that probably after this was over, that Jeremy would not recall or even talk any of these things about I'm breaking my back or I'm driving a truck and all this stuff. And he really hasn't. He just stopped all that. He's going on with life. The spark of life that was in Jimmy is the same spark of life that's in Jeremy.